The girl stepped out of the taxi and paused for a moment, letting her eyes sweep over the towering building before her. The sun reflected off the glass facade, blindingly bright, yet she didn't flinch. Her heart thumped loudly in her chest, but she forced herself to breathe evenly. In her hand, she gripped a plain envelope, its contents heavier than anything she had ever carried. Her father's debt, the last remnants of pride and responsibility he could no longer face. She could almost hear her father's weary voice in her mind, telling her not to worry, not to be afraid, but she knew that this was her burden now. Every step toward the entrance felt both surreal and grounding. The marble floor gleamed beneath her polished shoes, reflecting the high ceilings and the opulent chandeliers above. The smell of fresh flowers mingled with the faint aroma of expensive leather and polished wood. She felt out of place, a stark contrast to the polished executives who passed by with purposeful strides, briefcases in hand. Yet, there was no hesitation in her steps. Each footfall carried determination and a stubborn streak of defiance that had been nurtured by years of hardship. As she approached the reception desk, her nerves threatened to betray her, but she straightened her back and lifted her chin. The receptionist gave her a polite smile, one that seemed to silently measure her worth. "May I help you?" the woman asked, her tone courteous but professional. Swallowing hard, she nodded. I need to see the CEO, she said, her voice firmer than she expected. The words hung in the air, a mixture of respect and resolve. Within minutes, she was escorted through sleek corridors, past walls lined with abstract art and the occasional framed award, until they reached the CEO's office. The doors opened with a soft click, and she stepped inside, her pulse quickening. The room was vast, furnished with dark wood and leather that spoke of power and wealth. Behind a massive desk sat the man himself, tall, impeccably dressed, his sharp gaze meeting hers instantly. He did not rise, did not smile, yet there was an intensity in his eyes that made her own resolve steel. She swallowed again, lifted the envelope, and spoke. "This is to settle my father's debt." The CEO didn't immediately reach for the envelope. Instead, he leaned back slightly in his chair, steepling his fingers as he regarded her with a measured, almost unreadable expression. His eyes flicked over her, the determination in her posture, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers clutched the envelope like a lifeline. She could feel his scrutiny as if it were a physical weight pressing down on her, making her stand taller, refusing to waver. "I assume you came here to settle your father's debt," he said finally, his voice calm but edged with curiosity. There was no anger, no impatience, only a quiet power that made the room feel colder despite the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. She nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, sir. It's all he owes. Her words faltered under the intensity of his gaze, but she forced herself to continue. "I want to make it right." For a moment, the silence stretched, thick and heavy. She noticed how impeccably organized the office was. Every book in the shelves aligned perfectly, every document stacked neatly, and yet, in the midst of this order, he seemed almost unpredictable, like a storm contained behind a calm surface. Finally, he rose from his chair and approached her slowly. Each step he took felt deliberate, measured, as if weighing not just the envelope but her resolve as well. He extended a hand, not to take the envelope, but as if to gently halt her intentions. "You don't owe me anything," he said softly, almost as if testing whether she would believe him. She blinked, stunned. Her fingers tightened on the envelope. I came to," she started, but he interrupted with a slight, knowing smile. "Dinner," he said simply. "You owe me dinner, nothing else." Her mind raced. Relief and disbelief warred with the years of worry and preparation she had carried here. She had imagined this moment countless times. Humiliation, rejection, insistence, but not this. A simple, almost casual dismissal of the debt she had come to repay. She wanted to argue, to insist that her father's honor demanded repayment, yet something in his gaze told her that this wasn't a negotiation about money. It was about something else, something unspoken, something that required trust, even if tentative. She exhaled slowly, letting a fraction of the tension leave her body. For the first time since stepping into the lobby, she felt the rigid lines of responsibility soften just slightly, and in that fleeting moment, she realized this encounter might be the beginning of something far more complex than a simple transaction. They stepped out of the office, the sunlight softer now, filtered through the city buildings, but the weight of the moment lingered between them. The envelope, once the center of her anxiety, now felt almost irrelevant, tucked safely in her bag. The CEO walked beside her with an ease that belied the sharpness he had shown in his office. She kept her eyes forward, unsure whether to feel relief, suspicion, or something in between. The restaurant they entered was quiet, intimate, a stark contrast to the bustling corporate world they had just left behind. Soft golden light bathed the polished wooden tables, and the subtle aroma of spices and freshly baked bread filled the air. He guided her to a table near the corner, where the cityscape stretched out through floor-to-ceiling windows. The choice of the table seemed deliberate, a small gesture that suggested he wanted her to feel at ease, yet still in a space where he could observe and assess her. At first, the conversation was surprisingly mundane. He asked about her journey to the city, her thoughts on the food, and small, everyday topics. She responded cautiously, testing his tone, measuring the distance between politeness and genuine curiosity. And then, gradually, the barriers began to soften. He mentioned a book he had recently read, and she admitted to enjoying reading herself, though she often didn't have the time. A laugh escaped her before she could stop it, light, unexpected, freeing. She realized it had been months since she had allowed herself even a moment of such levity. The more they talked, the more she noticed the subtleties, a slight warmth in his smile when she disagreed with him, the way he tilted his head as if genuinely interested in her perspective, and the moments of quiet between sentences where words weren't needed. She found herself listening, not calculating, not bracing, but truly hearing him. For the first time since arriving, she felt the burden of her father's debt lift, replaced by something lighter, almost fragile, like the tentative trust building in that small corner of the restaurant. By the time dessert arrived, she realized the envelope in her bag had been forgotten. Money and debts, obligations and obligations fulfilled, all of it seemed distant now. What remained was this unexpected connection, subtle and unspoken, a bridge forming between two very different worlds. The CEO's presence was no longer intimidating. It was a quiet challenge, an invitation to a story neither of them had anticipated, yet both seemed willing to explore. The conversation lingered even after the plates were cleared. Neither of them seemed eager to break the rhythm of quiet understanding that had settled between them. Outside, the city lights shimmered like distant stars, and she felt a strange sense of calm she hadn't experienced in years. The tension of debts, responsibilities, and familial pride that had driven her here seemed to melt into the soft hum of the restaurant. As they walked back through the streets, side by side, she found herself noticing details she had missed before. The way the evening breeze carried a faint scent of jasmine from a nearby garden, the laughter of children playing in a courtyard, and the subtle, confident stride of the man beside her. It was a different kind of power she sensed now, not the authority of the office or the weight of financial control, but a quiet command of presence, of patience, and of understanding. She stole a glance at him, wondering if he realized the impact of his words that afternoon. "I don't understand," she said softly, almost to herself. Why let me come all this way if you weren't going to take the debt?" He looked at her with that calm, unreadable expression again, but there was warmth in his eyes now, the kind that made her feel seen rather than judged. "Because sometimes," he said slowly, "what you owe isn't money. It's presence, trust, a willingness to step into the unknown. That's harder than any debt you can measure." Her chest tightened at the weight of his words, but it wasn't the heavy, suffocating weight she had carried for months. It was the weight of possibility, the kind that makes your heart race and your mind whirl, but in a way that excites rather than frightens. She realized that the dinner, the conversation, the shared laughter, had all become a repayment of a different sort. It was a connection built on honesty, courage, and openness, something no envelope or banknote could ever capture. By the time they reached the street corner where their paths would diverge, she felt a sense of gratitude that went beyond relief. This encounter, unexpected and unconventional, had reshaped her understanding of responsibility, honor, and human connection. She smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile, and he returned it with a subtle nod, an acknowledgement of the shared understanding between them. As she walked away, the city lights reflecting in her eyes, she realized that sometimes, what you owe is not a debt to be paid but a moment to be lived. And for the first time in a long while, she felt free.